Welcome to McDougall. On today's show, Dr. Andrew Nicholson will voice the concerns of responsible physicians about tainted food sources. Hello, I'm Wayne Judd. And now, the man your doctor may have warned you about, Dr. John.
You know, I was listening to the news last night, and a dietitian actually came on the news and said that we need to eat meat to get our protein.
Dietitian said that.
A dietitian. Can you believe that in this day and age that they would be so backward as to still be teaching that message?
Well, that person hasn't been watching our show.
Well, not only that, but did you come from a time when you believed that you had to eat meat to get protein?
Absolutely. In fact, my father was a God-fearing man who read the Old Testament, and he said that it was a command that you were to eat meat. He said it says clearly in the Bible that this and this and this thou shalt not eat, but he said this and this and this, which of course were the so-called clean meats of the Jewish tradition, thou shalt eat. He said it was a commandment of God.
And he was happy about that. He was a man who brought home the bacon to all that.
He was a farmer. No bacon, but we had plenty of beef.
People believed that meat is absolutely necessary. It's kind of the American way. It's our birthright to eat all that meat. And first of all, the truth is we don't have to have the meat to get the protein. And we should be able to figure that out. If we just looked around the world, we see lots of nations of people who consume diets with very little meat and sometimes no meat at all, for example, in Asian and African countries.
What do they eat? They
eat rice, corn, potatoes.
That's protein?
Some beans. Yes, as a matter of fact, it's a lot of protein.
What does a potato have?
Potato has, well, let me give you a good example of how much.
I think that's the bread of the gods, frankly. So I love potatoes.
Let me give you an example of how easy it is to get protein. What's the time in life when you grow the most? When you're a baby.
When you're small.
Yeah, when you're a little baby. You double in size the first 2 years of your life.
Okay.
What's the ideal food for little babies?
Mother's milk.
You got it. Mother's milk is 5% protein. Potatoes are 11% protein. Rice is 8% protein. Bread is 14% protein. Beans, peas, and lentils are 28% protein. It is impossible to design a protein-deficient diet. Look, you can grow hippopotamuses, giraffes, elephants on plants. You ought to be able to grow puny little human beings on plants and get plenty of protein. The problem, Wayne, is this. We take this message to the extreme and we get extra protein. All the protein we can possibly get in, just like your dad taught.
Right.
That's harmful.
Is that bad? Why is it bad?
Because that extra protein causes a burden on the body. It causes the liver to overwork and actually will damage the liver. And somebody who already has liver damage, it'll cause the liver to actually deteriorate faster. And the same thing with the kidneys.
I thought the body I've always believed my body could just get rid of what it doesn't need.
I bet
you too many vitamins, too many. I take vitamins for people over 50.
I bet you used to believe that all that protein would even go into your muscles and make you look like a bodybuilder, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
But I won't ask you to take off your shirt.
Well, I never drove any girls crazy, I'll say that right now.
That excess protein also, it causes the body to change its mineral balance, and you lose tremendous amounts of calcium into your kidney tract, and as a consequence, you end up causing osteoporosis. It is the cause of osteoporosis, excess protein, particularly animal protein, and also kidney stones. So it's important that people get the message correct on protein. You can't design a protein-deficient diet based on vegetables and fruits, and you can design a diet that is excess in protein very easily, so people need to be very careful.
But it's no fun, is it?
Yes,
John,
it is fun. Those are good foods. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
And we'll be back in a moment with Dr. Andrew Nicholson.
Just say.
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 Hello.
And welcome back. I spent 6 years in my town of Santa Rosa, California, talking to people in lectures, talking on the radio, really expressing my message in the community. But you know that my fellow physicians would not invite me to address them at medical conferences. And it wasn't until a brave doctor stood up and said, I'd like to have Dr. John McDougall come and talk to the fellow doctors, and I don't care what it does to my reputation. I still want him there to express his message, and I want to thank Dr. Andrew Nicholson for doing that. He got me invited to my first conference in my own hometown, and it was an impression we made that day, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite strong.
And now, Dr. Nicholson, you're with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in Washington, D.C., and you're trying to make a real difference. Tell people what Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine means. I mean, it sounds like a wonderful thing to belong to.
Well, we have 4,000 member physicians, and we have quite a number of non-physician members as well. And our two main goals are, one, to raise the standards of medical research with the ethics and the actual scientific procedures. And the other is to really teach the public a little bit more about how they can be as healthy as possible.
Let's go a little further into this responsible part, because this is where your controversy has really come up. You have taken a position on experimentation on animals, isn't that correct? And got yourself an awful lot of publicity about it, both positive and negative. You think that we shouldn't be sticking electrodes in monkeys' brains and putting toxic substances in rabbits' eyes. Is that correct? I mean, what the heck's wrong with that?
Well, the fact of the matter is that this is just poor science, if nothing else. The real discoveries in science historically have not been made in this way, but the wrong people have gotten credit in many cases for making discoveries. And what we feel is that the clinicians who are doing work with human beings are the real scientists out there making those discoveries. And they're the ones that deserve the credit for a lot of the scientific research which has been done. In addition to which, animals are so different from humans in a variety of ways that oftentimes when a discovery is quote-unquote made on an animal, if it is applied to a human, it can actually be dangerous. And there have been a number of medicines which have been discovered in that way and have even caused cancer in people when they were inappropriately applied.
So you don't think this is a matter of just cruelty to animals? For you, it's bad science. You're not opposed to doing it on the animals as an animal rights proponent,
Well,
are
are
you?
you opposed as an animal rights person? You're concerned about their welfare?
Well, we are certainly concerned about their welfare, but as physicians and as a physician group, our primary responsibility is the scientific basis of this research.
You know, people are very callous to this whole thing. I know I went through all my medical training. I didn't hesitate once when they took me into the dog laboratory to do useless experimentations on the dogs. I look back and think about the things that I did to defenseless dogs, sacrifice them, and I learned virtually nothing out of it. But I didn't think about it then. And I think until you bring the issues to people and ask them to stop for a moment and think that this is another being, has feelings, what are you gaining from it? You know, is it really worth it? Then you don't bother to consider
But
it.
bad science, I've never heard anybody call that bad science. I've lived all my life believing that this was the way it had to be done if we were going to be well, and humans are a higher order, therefore we need to keep working on animals.
Well, isn't that still a big argument, Andrew? I mean, don't the people that are on the established side of medicine, don't they still stand up and say we would not be where we are today if it wasn't for animal experiments?
They certainly do, John. They stand up and say exactly that. And what we try to educate the public on, if we're not able to have an impact on certain numbers of physicians, is that this is not the case. That the real research, that if you read the New England Journal of Medicine on any particular day, the real important discoveries are always clinical. There are always reports on large numbers of human beings. And any time there is some research which is done on animals, they'll always say we can't tell anything about the value of this until it's done with humans.
We go on to the phase 3 studies.
The phase 3 studies.
We do them with people. And you'd like to just cut out the phases that are cruel and also can be misleading. And you got a lot of attention. As a matter of fact, it's becoming a very emotional issue all over the country. But you've also had criticism because when you try and present good science to people, they just go back and they call you an animal rights activist, label you with names.
Absolutely. And what we try to do, actually, we feel very strongly, particularly about the education of physicians, because you and so many other physicians are asked to do animal laboratories during their education. And what we really feel is that not only is this bad science, but it contributes to the hardening of their personality. It makes them callous, makes them less able to feel the suffering. And the medical education process itself is a process of making physicians much less able to feel the suffering of their patients. And so what we are trying to do is to get animal use completely out of medical education in the interest of helping physicians, amongst other things, to be more compassionate.
Well, this is the more controversial side that you folks are known for in the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. But there's another side that I bet a lot of folks don't know about, the fact that you proposed the new basic 4 food groups that didn't include the dairy and the meat, and that you've also tried to get public interest in issues such as breast cancer, and get the school children involved in better nutrition, better lunches in the schools. And so what I want to do is I want to talk to you about those particular advancements. We won't have the controversy around that. Everybody's in favor of better health for children, women, and men across the country. And so we'll get to that when we get back. My guest, Dr. Andrew Nicholson, and we'll be back with you in just a moment.
Are you looking for a way to change your life? The answer may be as easy as watching TV. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new channel that's designed to teach you to speak English. New opportunities will be available to you when you learn the language of the internet, commerce, travel, and diplomacy. No need to pay for your expensive schools or tutors. You can learn English by watching Hello Channel. Invest in yourself. For a brighter future, say hello.
We know where they've taken her.
In a defining time, amid a noble quest, a bond is forged.
We are here to save the princess.
But the princess is sleeping. Sorry.
Imagine what a little time can do for your family.
The princess is sleeping.
Oh, sorry. Excuse us. Shh.
From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And with us is Dr. Andrew Nicholson from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. We've talked about the more controversial side, but the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Andrew, has changed the basic 4 food groups. You're the first guys that stood up and said, let's lop the first 2 off, and as a compromise, they gave us a pyramid.
That's right. What we actually recommend is a new 4 food groups with fruits, grains, vegetables, and legumes or beans and peas. No cholesterol, less than 10% of calories is fat.
And we don't say the word vegetarian once, did we?
Not needed at all.
Because that brings out a lot of emotional reaction in people, too.
Although it's certainly becoming more acceptable, I should say. I think in the last 5 years, the V word has become less controversial than it once was, and more acceptable to use. But so what we recommend is this kind of diet. And for example, you were mentioning before with the school children, historically, the USDA has provided school kids with a whopping 37 to 40% of calories as fat. And as you know, coronary artery disease, amongst other diseases, begins in childhood. And children who have died at the age of 3 years of age in car accidents, when their coronary arteries are examined, they're actually able to find the beginnings of those plaques at that time.
Well, the school board, United States Department of Agriculture, they give kids fruits and vegetables. They give them ketchup.
Right, and we're talking about...
Didn't they list ketchup as part of the fruit and vegetable group?
They certainly did.
Are you going to tell me ketchup is bad?
No, but I'm trying to tell you that it's pretty weak effort on the part of the United States Department of Agriculture. But it is changing, just like more physicians are getting aware of the issues of responsible medicine and joining groups like Dr. Nicholson's. They're becoming aware that we have to make changes. This can't continue to be a business of drugs and just drugs and surgery and profit. It's got to be a business directed toward the betterment of human health. And so lots of doctors are joining the bandwagon, and the United States Department of Agriculture and many of the school boards are also realizing that the efforts they've made are insignificant. We have to make changes.
They are now recommending that the diet for school children be 30% of calories as fat, which we applaud as an improvement, but we also caution the public to realize that this is nowhere near where we need to be.
Where do we need to be?
We need to be less than 10% of calories as fat with no cholesterol in the diet.
You're throwing that V word in again.
Pure vegan diet. That's the way to go, folks. And basically what we're saying is that responsible medicine, where it once was considered responsible to detect illness early and to treat it, we now have the information to be able to say confidently that the vast majority of diseases in this country can be completely prevented through lifestyle change.
Okay, if you're going to get your policy through, just say that the schools in Washington, D.C. decided to make this kind of change and put a diet of starches, vegetables, and fruits, you know, oatmeal for breakfast, spaghetti and marinara sauce for dinner, and bean burritos without the cheese. What would you expect to happen to the kids?
They won't eat it, first of all. I've worked with young people all my life. They won't eat the stuff you gentlemen are talking about. How are you going to get kids to eat this in a cafeteria?
Well, the main point is that they do like it, and they will eat it, and they actually love this food. It's a question of preparing it in the proper fashion. I would suggest that if you had a piece of meat and you didn't put any spices whatsoever on it and just roasted it and served it up to a bunch of kids, they're not going to like that. What they like is the spices and the proper taste, which can be added to any kind of food. And if you make a wonderful vegetarian chili, they're going to love it.
So will the government help us train people to cook food that way? Or will we just recommend diets?
Well, the government is never going to do it until the demand is there on the part of the people. So we're trying to go into the schools, teach the children, institute nutritional curricula to actually teach the children what it really means to be healthy, so that they can go home, create that desire in their parents. We're going to the Parent-Teacher Association meetings. And then when they say to the USDA, we demand healthy food for our kids, healthy and tasty food for our kids, then we're going to see those changes really.
And besides that, Wayne, I think you're wrong. I discovered you were wrong on that issue of kids not doing this. I used to give lectures to high schools, and after the kids got through asking things like, where do we get our protein, where do we get our calcium, you know what they hit me with? How do we get our parents to eat this way? And I was shocked because it's the first time I realized it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with the ability to understand the message and a level of self-worth. And these kids care about themselves. They want to look good. They want to feel good. They want to function well. They want to be better athletes. They're tired of the pimples. They're tired of being overweight. And so they want the same thing adults want. And so if you give them the education and make the food taste good, as you and I know it can, then it's going to be an easy job.
Well, I agree that food is pretty gosh awful that's prepared in cafeterias.
You wouldn't have to improve it much, would you?
A little improvement would probably go a long ways. But I know that typically the campus where I work when I'm not doing this, it's emptied every lunch, and yet there's nice, supposedly healthful food being served. That could be debated too after listening to Dr.
Well, that's
John
one of the excuses that they give for bringing in our fast food restaurants, not only into our schools, but into our hospitals.
Absolutely.
Is they say, and of course this is equivalent to putting cigarette machines back into hospitals to bring the fast food restaurants with their cholesterol and fat and high oil diets
no question,
into a hospital. So, you know, having that excuse that people are too stupid and too disinterested in themselves to make a dietary change is one that's got to be stopped. People care. It's really the dollars, the business part of it that sends these unhealthy institutions into our schools and into our hospitals and other parts of our community. We've got to stop this, and you guys are doing it.
Absolutely.
Making a difference. And the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine is an organization that it stands up and says, this is what we're all about, folks, and you can change, you can make a difference. Dr. Nicholson will be back with us. Join us in just a moment.
This is Hello Channel. Come learn English as you watch TV. It will change your life.
We're talking with Dr. Andrew Nicholson from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. You've had, I was shocked when you told me this, an opportunity you just had. You went to Cuba?
That's right, John. There is an international surgery conference every year in Cuba, and I read the invitation several months ago that there was going to be this conference primarily with endocrinologists and surgeons, other high-tech review of procedures like laparoscopy, but they also talked about early treatment of breast cancer and detection and prevention, which interests me, which is one of my main interests. So I sent them a letter saying, I can do a paper for you on diet and the prevention and treatment of breast cancer. And I was stunned, but they invited me to be one of the main speakers at the conference. I went down to La Havana, and presented in Spanish a conference on how people can actually avoid getting breast cancer by eating properly in front of 500 surgeons, and they loved it.
Mm.
It was incredible.
Not controversy. In fact, I bet this would really shock our audience to know that when a doctor stands up and talks about diet being the cause, and also should be involved in the treatment of breast cancer, that the room is silent. People don't stand up and scream at you, do they?
No, they're very, very impressed.
And they're interested in the information, and I think that initially people who weren't involved in the business would expect otherwise. They'd expect their family doctor to stand up and say, "What are you telling us? What are you telling us for? This can't possibly be true." But this is good science, and doctors are very interested.
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is that they simply don't get exposed to it. They don't get taught this information in medical school. But if you can get up and show them the medical literature and teach them the whys and wherefores of how this comes to be true, they'll be very impressed. 1 out of every 8 women in this country will get breast cancer at some point in their life.
And you believe that it's caused by an unhealthy diet?
An unhealthy diet. If you look at places in the world where people eat much more healthfully, breast cancer is actually rare. And people who eat fatty diets have been actually found to have higher levels of estrogen. And epidemiologically, people who have breast cancer have higher levels of estrogen. And if you put somebody who has been eating a high-fat diet onto a low-fat diet, their estrogen levels will go down.
So are you taking the next step and saying that even after a woman gets breast cancer, she ought to change her diet?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, several studies have shown that people who eat healthier diets after they've been diagnosed have less aggressive cancer and live longer with their cancer.
Did you tell these 500 surgeons in Cuba that what they ought to do when they go back and they saw a patient with breast cancer, that the first thing they ought to say is, you ought to at least change your diet and we'll get on to the other therapy? Did you say that to them?
I said exactly that. And the wonderful thing about the healthcare system in Cuba is that they don't make any more money for the procedures that they do. So surgeons are just as interested in preventing procedures as anybody else. And they were very, very impressed. And several of the surgeons, I was inundated with questions about their own desire to change their diets. And when they change their diets, they'll be much more effective at helping their patients to change theirs.
I know you suggested that there's a financial motivation, but I have to believe even in this country, well-meaning doctors will tell their patients that they ought to change their diet. It makes all the sense in the world before they direct them to other therapies. Mm-hmm. That's responsible medicine.
That is exactly what we advocate, and we do frequent grand rounds in hospitals around the country here as well, advocating that.
And you said also something else I'd like to address from you. You said that this is not properly taught to doctors. How much education, you trained 15 years, I would guess, after I did. How much education on nutrition did you get in medical school?
Less than 10 hours.
Wow, the things have improved. Yeah, that's 4 years. I got 1 hour. So things are getting 10 times as good.
Right. Well, what we were taught in our biochemistry class about the deficiencies. If you don't ever eat vitamin C and how you can get scurvy and what the exact biochemical pathways are. And of course, as you know, the real diseases are diseases of excess, and we didn't learn anything about that.
Right. Excess cholesterol, excess fat, excess salt. We don't see beriberi, scurvy, or pellagra, do we?
Rare. I've never seen it.
Now, what are you gentlemen doing to make sure we get that into medical curricula? Have you been working at that? Is there any hope for the future? I continue to hear from Dr. John that the medical schools are missing it. What can you do in Washington to change that?
Well, there has been a real movement in response to the economic crisis, amongst other things, in healthcare currently.
But Dr. Nicholson, don't you think this will come from a groundswell from the patients finding out and individual doctors deciding there's a better way? I want to thank you very much for being with us. Dr. Andrew Nicholson from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, sharing a very positive message with us. We look forward to joining us next time. I'm Dr. John McDougall.